Number one on this year's list, obviously, Brock Bars. In all honesty, Brock Bowers' talent level itself almost isn't even worth evaluating, considering his monstrous target share and the fact that, much like Malik Neighbors per se, he's the undisputed most talented offensive player on his team, which in 2025 virtually guarantees double-digit targets every single week. In fact, when it comes to last season's tight ends, Bowers finished second to only Trey McBride in terms of his target share, as Bowers accounted for an astounding 25.8% of all the Raiders' targets last season. He accounted for 22% of all his team's air yards too, a mark that ranked third among 2024 tight ends. Bowers also accrued a quarter of all the Raiders' red zone targets, which ranked sixth among the position group. That kind of volume locks Bowers in as the top fantasy tight end in 2025, as even if Las Vegas drafts Ashton Gianti, Bowers would still be the team's top man beater, go-to guy, and chain mover. Last season, he was second in interceptions for first downs among 2024 tight ends and sixth among all players, and he will also still be the team's top red zone threat. Furthermore, the difference between the shit pile of QBs the Raiders started last season and Jonnu Smith is as stark as the change Tom Brady's cheekbones have undergone over the past 2 decades. And Bowers is thus poised for an even better fantasy season in 2025, which is insane to think about considering last season Bowers ranked third in fantasy points per game and first in total points, first in receptions and targets, first in yards, third in total routes run, 13th among all players, fifth in yards per route, and he was tied for ninth in touchdowns. Finally, we all know the best ability is availability and opportunity, and Bowers boasts both of those in spades. Last year, he played the second most snaps of any tight end, trailing only the incomparable K-Dot. Like Mark Davis getting bowl cut, you can count on Bowers finishing among the top 3 tight ends in 2025, barring injury. Number 2 on this year's list, a direct descendant of the Lucky Charms guy, Trey McBride. Like Bowers, Trey McBride's skill set in itself is almost a moot point considering his glacial volume. He led all tight ends in target share in 2024 and air yards share, in addition to chemistry with Kyler Murray, as his chemistry with Murray guarantees a top 3 finish as long as he doesn't have another horrifying leg injury. It is also blatantly obvious that McBride is a sharp route runner and is a natural pass catcher, rarely dropping balls that he shouldn't. Among last year's TEs, McBride ranked second in points per game and PRK, second in receptions and targets to only Bowers, second in receiving yards, fourth in open rating, fourth in yards per route, fifth in routes run. The former Mackey Award winner's strong hands combined with his surprising finesse allows him to rack up yak yards, and last year he finished with the 4th most yards after the catch and the 4th most yards after contact among tight ends. McBride's touchdowns are well overdue to skyrocket too, as the Arizona pass catcher finished with the 3rd most red zone targets in terms of tight ends, but only scored twice the entire season. That improved touchdown rate is also likely because of McBride's penchant for big plays, as last season he ranked among the top 5 TEs in catches for over 10 yards and catches for over 20 yards. Add in the fact that McBride is on the field as often as McDonald's ice cream machines are broken and finished second in snap percentage among tight ends last season, and you've got to lock it in, high floor, top tight end. At number 3, we have George Kittle. Now, let me start this by saying if George Kittle's target share was as absurd as McBride's or Bowers, he would easily clear the top spot on this list as he ranked as the number 1 tight end by far in terms of most advanced analytics. For instance, last year, Kittle led tight ends in yards per target and ranked second across the entire league in that statistic regardless of position. He also led the position group in receiving success rate, trailing only the Lions' David Montgomery when it came to all NFL players. One more stat, ESPN Analytics uses player tracking data from Next Gen Stats to evaluate every route pass catchers run and scores their performance in 3 phases of the game from 0 to 99. Who led all tight ends and ranked second only to A.J. Brown across the entire league in overall rating with an 88 score? Bitch, you guessed it! It's worth noting that Brown and Kittle were the only players in the entire league who scored above a 75 on that rating scale. Moreover, Kittle trailed only Jefferson and Chase in total EVE, which stands for efficiency versus expected, which is a statistical model from Opta Analyst that compares success on every single play to a league average based on situation and opponent. Now, as far as the more standard stats when it comes to 2025 TEs, Kittle finished first in fantasy points per game and third in total points, first in yards per catch, tied for second in receiving TDs, third in receiving yards, fifth in receptions, and seventh in targets. Although Kittle's target share wasn't as insane as the top two tight ends on this year's list, he still had a significant one and accounted for 18% of all of San Fran's 2024 targets, which placed sixth among the position. Kittle also finished with the fourth most red zone targets among TEs and had the fourth highest snap share in terms of last year's TE crop. It makes sense considering Kittle is as sure-handed as they come and is essentially a large, aggressive, elite wide receiver who's phenomenal at blocking, who just happens to be playing tight end. In 2024, Kittle sported the third best catch percentage across the entire league. Looking for one final efficiency stat to blindly convince you to draft Kittle like you're Kyle Shanahan blindly calling passes while you're up by 25 points in the third quarter of the Super Bowl? Kittle led all tight ends in yards per catch last season. Number 4, Jonnu. While this ranking is in part biased because I owned Jonnu Smith in a league last year and have loved his athleticism and versatility for the position going back to his Titans days, Smith's fantasy totals from last season speak for themselves. Jonnu is essentially playing the Evan Engram / Travis Kelce Joker role now in Miami, as he frequently lines up in the slot and is a size mismatch against any defensive back and a speed mismatch against any linebacker. That role in a mostly pass-friendly weather resulted in the following TE rankings last season: 5th in fantasy points per game and 4th in total points, tied for 2nd in receiving TDs, 3rd in receptions for first downs, 11th in the NFL, 4th in receptions and targets, 4th in receiving yards, and 4th in YAC. Jonnu can also break tackles like a running back and has an RB's ball carrier vision. Last year, he had the 2nd most broken tackles and the 5th most yards after contact among the position. Those broken tackles and yards after contact resulted in plays that go further down the field than the usual horizontal TE's route tree, and Jonnu ranked 3rd in catches for at least 10 yards among last year's TEs. His target share is elite too, and he ranked 4th in TEs in target share last year, accounting for 19.5% of all of Miami's targets. He had the 5th most red zone targets among tight ends too. Jonnu also proved in 2024 that even if Tua's helmet is accidentally touched at all, like literally ever, and he's forced to miss time, that he will still produce via dump-offs over the middle, checkdowns, and TE screens. Number 5 on this year's list, Dan Campbell. That's Sam LaPorta. They just look exactly the fucking same. Sam LaPorta had a down year last year relative to last season's performance, as he was considered the number 1 fantasy TE last season in terms of his ADP over the summer. In spite of his early season inconsistency, LaPorta plays in one of the most productive and creative offenses in the entire league, and he finished his season with 6 straight double-digit fantasy weeks while placing among the top 10 tight ends when it came to both fantasy points per game and PRK. LaPorta has underrated deep speed for the position, is highly versatile, and has some of the surest hands in the league. Add in the fact that he looks so much like Dan Campbell that the Lions head coach has to have an unconscious bias for targeting LaPorta's magnificent mustache, and it's easy to see how LaPorta ranked among last year's tight ends: 9th in fantasy points per game and 8th in PRK, 3rd in catches for 20 plus yards, tied for 3rd in touchdowns, 4th in YAC over expectation, 6th in receiving yards, and 6th in YAC. LaPorta also finished 6th among tight ends in overall receiver rating, 8th in open rating, and ran the 9th most routes. LaPorta's versatility and Dan Campbell-like appearance keep him on the field as much as anyone too, and in 2024 he ranked 6th in both snap share and total snaps played among TEs. The only concern regarding LaPorta is the Lions' hefty supply of playmakers that allows them to spread the ball around as well as any team in the league. As a result of the Lions' multiple back offense that is home to Amon-Ra St. Brown and the speedy Jameson Williams, LaPorta's 2024 volume was much lower than most of the other tight ends on this list, and he finished outside the top 10 tight ends in both targets and receptions. Number 6, we have David Njoku, who barely beats out Mark Andrews for the 6th slot in this year's list, simply due to his age and the fact that the Browns don't spread the ball around nearly as much as the Ravens. David Njoku has improved his once maligned drop issues, and when he has the ball in his hands, he might be the most explosive tight end in the league in terms of his top speed and acceleration. In the face of missing 6 games due to injury, Njoku still accrued these 2024 TE ranks: 4th in fantasy PPG and 11th in total points, 5th in targets, tied for 6th in broken tackles, tied for 9th in receiving touchdowns, and 10th in receptions. With his size and sky-high leaping ability, Njoku is also clearly the Browns' favorite red zone target, and in 2024, Njoku accrued a massive 37% of all of Cleveland's targets inside the 10-yard line, which ranked 3rd among tight ends and 6th among all players. As long as the Browns don't accidentally start a rapist who actually sucks at football instead of a quarterback for the checks notes 3rd year in a row, and maybe even if they do, Njoku will still finish as a mid to high-end TE1 again this season due to his talent level, target share, and red zone target share. At number 7, we have Mandrews. Now, Mark Andrews, Isaiah likely disappointed everyone who drafted him for the first quarter of the 2024 fantasy season. However, he finished the year with 6 straight double-digit fantasy weeks, much like Sam LaPorta, and he has clear chemistry with one of the best QBs in the league, in one of the most potent offenses in the league, and is still a big-bodied red zone target. He was 7th in TE red zone target share last season, even if he's lost a step or two athleticism-wise since his injury. And a potentially lost Mandrews step has likely been greatly overstated, considering Andrews trailed only Kittle in burn percentage and ranked 6th in the league in burn percentage across all positions. Now, burn percentage measures exactly how often a pass catcher achieves a burn, which is whenever a receiver, quote, wins a route, which is determined by a formula based on game state info and how far downfield the pass is thrown, and his matchup against a defender when targeted. Andrews also finished with the 6th most yards per route and the 3rd highest yards per target in 2024 among TEs. He passed the eye test with flying colors as the season wore on too, and in terms of last year's tight ends, Andrews finished 8th in fantasy points per game and 6th in total points, 1st in receiving TDs, 2nd in ESPN Analytics overall receiver score, which was 8th among all players, 5th in catch percentage, 13th overall among all players, 8th in red zone targets, and 9th in receiving yards. Mark Andrews also led the position in average targeted air yards, according to Next Gen Stats, and had the 7th highest share of his team's air yards among TEs. Lamar's trust in Andrews is easy to see, and it's no surprise that he finished the year with the 6th best catch percentage in terms of 2024 TEs, and the 8th best catch percentage across the entire NFL. If you're searching for one final proof point that Mandrews still has it, look no further than the fact that he led the league in passer rating when targeted, with an average passer rating of a whopping 140 on targets that came his way. And he also ranked 3rd in receiving success rate among last year's tight ends and 6th in the NFL. Next, at number 8, we have Taylor Swift's boyfriend. Now, whether it was the eye test or statistics, it was obvious that Travis Kelce stepped back harder in 2024 than Allen Iverson before he hit that shot over Ty Lue. Kelce struggled to beat press coverage, didn't explode off the line of scrimmage at all, dropped an unusual amount of passes, and didn't seem to be the yak maven he once was. For instance, Kelce ranked dead last, 158th out of 158 players evaluated on ESPN's overall receiving score last season. When it came to ESPN's catch rating, Kelce posted a score of 0 out of 99, again tied for dead last. He also dropped the 3rd most passes among last year's TEs. Maybe Taylor has his fingers tired. However, Kelce might still be the most trusted pass catcher on a team that houses arguably the best quarterback in the league, is still one of the most experienced and smartest zone coverage beaters at the position, lines up as a wide receiver on a regular basis, and still often acts as Mahomes' security blanket. In terms of last season's fantasy TEs, Taylor Swift's boyfriend ranked 7th in fantasy points per game and 5th in PRK, 3rd in receptions and targets, 3rd in total air yards, 5th in receiving yards, 5th in receptions for first downs, and 6th in total yak. What keeps Kelce in that TE1 conversation is his consistently high target share and massive Mahomes trust. When it came to last year's TEs, Kelce accounted for 23% of all of KC's targets, a target share that ranked 3rd to only Bowers and McBride. He was 2nd in TE air yard share as well, while accounting for 24% of all of the Chiefs' air yards last season. In addition, he led the position in red zone targets with 25, ranked 4th in TE red zone target share with 25%, and played the 3rd most snaps of any tight end. Couple that with the fact that Kelce ran the 3rd most routes among TEs last season, and he might just be a lock-it-in, high-floor TE1 again in 2025 due to his involvement in the Chiefs' offense, even if his efficiency is absolute shite. At number 9, we have the Broncos' newly acquired tight end, Evan Engram, who was only able to play in 9 games last season, 2 of which he was injured in, so many of his season totals are as unexciting as watching Bo Nix complete every pass within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. Granted, when Evan Engram was healthy, he still showed the leaping ability, speed, and agility that make him one of the top 5 receiving mismatches at the position. Evan Engram ranked among last season's tight ends 13th in fantasy points per game, 5th in receptions per game, and 13th in receiving yards per game. The Jaguars released Engram in early March, about 11 weeks post-labrum surgery, and the Broncos were reportedly thrilled to get him to enable him to play the Joker role there, which Sean Payton reportedly highly covets. According to ESPN, Engram may not practice this spring, but, quote, should be ready by week 1. Excluding the 2 games Engram was injured in and forced out of early, he also impressively scored at least 10 fantasy points in 5 of his 7 healthy weeks. Remember, that little rat fuck some people call Sean Payton once went nuts lining Jimmy Graham up at receiver almost every play and turning him into one of the top TEs in the league with yards and touchdowns galore, to the point that he actually changed his position on Instagram, hoping that that would lead to a receiver-worthy contract, because at the time, there was a huge debate about the franchise tag for tight ends versus receivers and yada, yada, yada. But you get the point. Sean Payton loves tight ends. Number 10 and last on this year's list, Dallas Goedert. In all honesty, there is a significant drop-off after Evan Engram among fantasy TEs in terms of consistency and target share, but Goedert barely cracks the list due to his performance once he got healthy and the Eagles' increased usage of the freakishly huge pass catcher towards the end of the season and in the playoffs with TE screens, end arounds, and as the first read off of RPOs. Like Engram, Goedert has a size mismatch against any defensive back, while possessing an athleticism/explosiveness mismatch against any linebacker, with the unfortunate task of trying to cover the highly efficient tight end. And much like Engram, Goedert missed a significant chunk of last season, specifically 8 games, due to injury, so many of his season totals aren't exactly anything George Bush would label as a WMD. In the face of those injuries, Goedert still ranked 11th in fantasy points per game, 2nd in yards per route to only Kittle, 3rd in overall receiver score, 5th in yak per reception, 5th in yak percentage, 5th in yak above expectation. As evidenced by ranking among the top 5 TEs and a number of efficiency metrics, Goedert does have undisputed top 10 fantasy talent at the position, but that isn't the question when it comes to his 2025 fantasy potential. The question when it comes to Goedert in 2025 is if Goedert will stay healthy, and also if he is able to maintain a fantasy-relevant target share, even with Saquon carries, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith siphoning targets, and Jalen Hurts scrambling and rushing for yards. But just to drive home just exactly how elite Goedert is, it's also worth noting he ranked 5th among tight ends in yards per target, 6th in receiving yards per game, and I swear Goedert has a fetish for finishing 5th because he also ranked 5th in average EVE. Like, subscribe for more, and thanks for watching. If you want to check out more of our content, you can always head over to votetheprocess.com to see everything we've been working on.